Hello everyone, I'm Charna Davis-Wiese and welcome to UCF Profiles. Can you imagine sidling up to the Formica counter, the familiar smell of fries in the air? When you order, you're asked, you want some Spam with that? It may sound comical, but it's true and an example of the powerful forces of globalization and innovation. Dr. Ty Matejowski joins us today, and he's from the Department of Anthropology at UCF. And, you know, I like to surf and look for interesting people and interesting professors, and when I saw fast food in the Philippines and Spam, I had to find out more.
Oh, good.
I had to find out more. And we really are talking about the Spam that people think we're talking about.
Right. It's not email Spam. It's actually the Spam that comes in a can that you eat.
The mystery meat.
The mystery meat, the all-purpose meat.
Now, first I have to ask you, how did you find out about the Spam popularity in the Philippines? I mean, how did you end up studying the Philippines?
Okay, well, I mean, my interest in the Philippines goes back to 1994 when I was a graduate student at Texas A&M. My professor had done work in the Philippines, and it so happens that he was going to the field and needed a research assistant, so I was lucky enough to tag along. So in the Philippines, you know, I did notice that Spam was, you know, widely consumed, very popular product, and I returned to the Philippines in 2005 to do some work, and at a major shopping mall in Manila, I happened to come across a Spam-themed restaurant. So kind of the wheels in my head were turning. I was there studying fast food anyway, so I was like, hey, this would be a great topic. And I was encouraged by some of my other faculty members, like, yeah, you need to pursue this. So hence I wrote a paper called Spam and Fast Food Globalization in the Philippines.
Now, globalization, is that one of your terms, or is that actually an anthropological term?
It's not one of my terms. It's been around for a while. It was popular in sociology and business, and kind of describes how global forms, oftentimes global retail forms, are altered at the local level to better meet community or local market conditions. And so it kind of fit well because it's a combination of global and local, and Spam is also a combination of, you know, spiced and ham. So it worked out well in that respect.
You know, it almost seems like what could be more American than Spam?
Right.
Yet people outside of the continental United States seem to like it more than we do.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is kind of a reflection of American culture. Spam is popular in countries that have pre-existing taste for pork, where canned products are popular, and also significantly where places where the American military has had a significant presence. So in places like Guam, Okinawa, the Philippines, Hawaii, all of these places where the American military has had bases or establishments over the time, you also tend to find a correlation to Spam consumption. In these places, they really love it.
I had actually read that in Guam, the average person eats at least 10 tins of Spam a year.
Yeah, it actually may even be more than that. In Guam, they sometimes refer to it as the Guamanese steak. And, you know, they see it as that popular and something.
In Hawaii, they do some kind of thing with rice and nori seaweed, almost like a Spam sushi.
Yeah, Spam sushi.
You have to forgive me, but that just really seems gross.
Well, yeah, to each his own, I guess.
That's right. That's right. I guess I eat calamari, so what can I tell you? So, probably going back to World War II, wasn't Spam on the rations of the U.S. soldiers? Is that how it got introduced?
Yeah. The American military kind of in a de facto way introduced Spam to the world through the fact that it was used in sea rations and you know, in the areas where the Allies as you know, took over, that it was not surprising that it began to kind of filter out to local population. So in a lot of ways, that's how they kind of developed a taste for, you know, Spam.
And the
Spam.
Globalization comes in how they innovate it to put their little twist on it.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, especially with the Spam restaurant that I came across, because they're taking a seemingly American product and a seemingly American retail format, fast food, and really altered it to kind of fit local tastes and preferences. So in a lot of ways, to them, Spam represents America because it is, its convenient format. It's seen as kind of a symbol. It has the historical linkages with the American military, which was in the Philippines for 90-something years, and also for the fact that oftentimes cans of Spam are brought back as gifts from overseas Filipinos. There's something known as pasalubong, is a Tagalog word for homecoming gifts. So roughly about 10% of the Philippines population of 85 million live or work out of seas, and so when they return to the islands, they're often expected to bring gifts. So next to things like chocolate or whiskey, Spam is the most popular consumable that is brought home.
And it's such a riot because there has been so much humor based on Spam. You've got Weird Al,
right,
who says if you have any left over, you can spackle the wall with it.
Right, Weird Al, Monty Python.
Spam-a-lot.
Spam-a-lot, yeah, even Captain Beefheart has poked fun at it. But what's surprising is this Spam humor doesn't really translate to other cultures in the way.
They don't think it's funny.
Yeah, my Filipino friends are often, they're kind of puzzled or perplexed by the common notion that Spam is something
funny.
Yeah, they just don't get it, and I have to try to explain, it has these humorous qualities, and to them it's like, well, why? It's just something that you eat. It's a good meat, and I have to admit though, many times I would actually gravitate towards Spam because I knew what I was eating in the Philippines
when you were there,
right? And so at least it was a familiar thing because sometimes people would serve you stuff and you weren't quite sure what you were getting.
So, okay, so out of the curiosity, I know this is no scientific merit, this question, or no research merit. So how do they actually serve it in these places?
Oh, it can be served various ways. At the restaurant, they prepare it in terms of like sandwiches. They have Spam spaghetti, Spam nuggets. The only thing they haven't developed supposedly is a Spam dessert, and they said that they're working on it. So everything else in the restaurant has Spam, but it's commonly served, at least in homes or households, kind of pan-fried. And you eat it for breakfast, or you can eat it with lunch, or even during what they term merienda, which is an afternoon snack. It's an all-day food, basically. Hot or cold, in and out of the can, it can be consumed.
I think we've just done a commercial.
Yeah, should be getting.
Now, when you told your friends, and you're in graduate school, I am going to work on this.
Right.
Did they tease you?
Yeah, I've oftentimes thought about it. It is kind of strange that I've produced this paper.
You're the Spam guy.
Right. And, it's like I went to graduate school and earned a PhD to study Spam. But yeah, but it's very representative of how global products can be indigenized and kind of reimagined or reinvigorated by local populations to kind of create these new and surprising outcomes that are very much different than kind of their Western or American roots.
And even if they look the same, because I remember years ago, right out of college, going to London and seeing McDonald's, and we had to go.
Right.
We just had to go. But even though it looked the same, it don't really taste the same.
Yeah.
It's different.
Companies like McDonald's and other global kind of multinational chains are very much attuned to appealing to local markets. So kind of there's this preconceived notion that when a chain like McDonald's comes in, it's going to create things like cultural homogeneity. It's going to, really work to undermine global diversity. What we're finding is that these companies have to kind of create menu options that appeal to local tastes and preferences. So there's also kind of a counter process of localization going on. And for the fact that now you have these indigenous chains, like in the Philippines, there's a company called Jollibee that has become very adept at taking the format and kind of the menu ideas of a McDonald's and kind of changing it or oriented it more towards local taste. So in fact, Jollibee is much more popular in the Philippines than McDonald's. It's really, the Philippines is one of the few countries where McDonald's doesn't have the larger market share of the fast food market. And
so it's just different, is it different foods, or it's served a different way?
They have hamburgers, they have fried chicken and rice, they have spaghetti, but the menu items at Jollibee tend to be much sweeter compared to what is served at McDonald's. Many of my Filipino friends will tell me the food at McDonald's taste sour.
Salty to them, probably.
Right. So, for example, the McDonald's tomato-based ketchup is very sour or tangy to them. They prefer the Jollibee banana-based ketchup. It's much sweeter and appeals to their kind of traditional taste.
One of my favorite books I ever read, and everybody makes fun of me for that, is Fast Food Nation.
Right.
And it just amazed me how huge these businesses are, how small they started out, basically on transportation. If people were driving more, right? So they were driving more, so they looked at, well, this might be a way we can make some money. People don't even have to get out of the car.
Sure, and actually now in the Philippines, as more and more of the middle class is starting to grow and more people have cars, you're actually seeing things like drive-thrus in the Philippines, which is kind of a novel development considering most people don't have the socioeconomic means to afford cars. So we're seeing kind of, in a lot of ways, fast food expansion being driven by the growth of the middle class.
I also had read that if you see a fast food place like McDonald's or Burger King going up what's seemingly in the middle of nowhere, buy property there.
Yeah, it's pretty much an indication that there's going to be growth going on.
That they actually can use satellite technology to detect where the next urban sprawl will be and what people will be driving by.
I'll be darned, I haven't heard that.
Fast Food Nation, I'm telling you, it was absolutely fabulous. How did you go to fast food as your area of interest?
Well, my main interest has always been retail globalization. And I was always interested in how Western retail forms or enterprises, how they operate or how their growth in provincial communities changes aspects of local life. So things like shopping malls, 24-hour convenience stores, or like a Walmart or a warehouse club, how the introduction of that changes the dynamics of local life or local economies. And so it's through this that I became interested in fast food. And for the fact that I kind of saw that there had been a growing interest by things like Fast Food Nation or Super Size Me. There's kind of a growing concern about the impact of fast food. And so I was interested in seeing how this translates in non-Western or non-American settings.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that as soon as we come back. We'll be right back. We're talking with anthropologist Ty Matejowski, and we're talking about the impact of fast food and all these different things that are drive-through, drive-in, quick, and changing our lives and what they do to lives in people outside of this country. My family in rural Midwest, and they despise the big box stores.
Right.
They really do. I mean, it's even worse than they despise the rival college football teams. And they really think it's ruining the mom and pop businesses and it's changing our culture. Do you see that overseas?
Well, my work in the Philippines, at least in the communities that I've looked at, like the introduction of shopping malls, it really had to do with their location. They constructed in one of the cities I examined, they constructed a new shopping mall, but it was constructed in the center of downtown. So local merchants were initially concerned that it was going to draw away their business, but what it actually did was kind of create a consumer magnet for downtown. So many people would go to the mall to window shop and kind of see the styles and see the products that were available, and then actually go out to the local marketplace to buy similar and much cheaper brands. But if a kind of big box store or mall or something of that size opens up in the periphery of downtown or the central business district, you know, many times that is a cause for concern because it's attracting people or consumer flows out of the traditional location of mom and pop stores. Right,
and the economics change as well because sometimes the big box stores can get things so much cheaper and sell them cheaper. then they'd probably put the mom and pops out.
That's true in the States, but at least where I work in the Philippines, many of the local merchants, street store merchants, have the advantage of not having a fixed price system. So they are able to negotiate, extend credit, and these are very favorable terms for many Filipinos, ordinary Filipinos who don't have the socioeconomic means to just go out and purchase big ticket items. So in this way, they still kind of have some advantage.
In reality, we have some globalization going on in this country as well. You know, things that are coming from other countries that we've changed for us, even in terms of fast food and things.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's oftentimes this idea that globalization is some unilateral process where Western values or ideas are projected onto the outside. But in many ways, I mean, we are very much affected by it as well. And, you know, styles, preferences, music genres are all...
Television shows, for sure. I think we get most of our most popular ones from England.
Yeah, yeah, it seems to be the case. So, yeah, I mean, we're definitely live in a globalized world where, you know, linkages or culture or barriers that existed before are really don't present that much of a challenge to new types of interactions.
Let's talk about some of the other things you do.
Okay.
Disasters. What happens after a disaster? Now, we all know here we've got the hurricanes.
That's true.
And sometimes when things are at the worst,
right,
we hear, well, you know what? The good part of this is the economy will really boom after a disaster, the rebuilding and everything like that. Does that happen really? In some cases, yeah. A lot of times there's this initial impact and there's like a kind of a downturn in the economy as people try to recover. But in the long term, what oftentimes happens is the wreckage or the difficulties that a disaster kind of creates gives, you know, local economic interests the opportunity to kind of revamp or reorganize in a much more significant way. So they can make changes rather than kind of in a gradual, incremental way, but more like within one fell swoop. So it can, in effect, kind of create more lasting changes. What got you into looking into that? Well, as you may or may not know, the Philippines is sometimes considered a culture of disaster. Its location along the Pacific Rim, the Ring of Fire, Typhoon Alley. Faults underneath the ocean. Right. They're very much exposed to disasters and natural catastrophes. And so, as such, in one of the communities that I looked at, it had recently recovered from an earthquake in 1990. And so I was interested in kind of how the earthquake, this disaster, acted as a catalyst for socioeconomic change. And so I found that, in effect, there was kind of this downturn where people thought that was basically the end of the city, and within a few years' time, thanks to kind of an inpouring of capital and kind of the efforts and initiative of local merchants, they were actually able to kind of reinvigorate themselves and kind of come back stronger. So kind of in a long-term macro sense, sometimes disasters can have positive economic effects. They didn't want to give up. It was their home. Right, right. And there, I mean, there's a strong sense that, you know, downtown was theirs, and, you know, a disaster, something even as to the magnitude of a 7.8 on the Richter scale earthquake won't be enough to, you know, make them leave their locations in downtown. That's so interesting. Anthropology, being that this is profiles, I like to find out how people got to where they are. Oh, sure. How'd you get interested in that? Well, I was always interested in other places and other cultures, and I initially I was thinking about pursuing a degree in history, but it seemed like that was kind of more just straight up academia, just working with books or documents. You can't change it. Yeah, and it just seemed like anthropology, when I first encountered this as like a senior in high school, it seemed like it was much more hands-on, much more kind of exciting, dynamic field. And plus it was the opportunity to travel and to, you know, visit other places of the world that you otherwise, you know, may not be able to. And so kind of being a kid from a small town in Texas, I mean, this seemed like a really exciting or dynamic, you know, career choice. And, you know, I didn't know any anthropologists, so I just kind of took a chance, and voila, it's become a career. Where else has it taken you besides the Philippines? Well, that's my main area of work, so that's where I've concentrated. So once you found your niche there, you found that there's so much to look at? Yeah, especially in the sense that, you know, the Philippines being a former American
colony, and the fact that they're very much attuned to what goes on here in the States. So for me, it was a an opportunity to experience kind of a foreign culture, but also kind of have some familiarity with what goes on in the States. So it seemed to kind of straddle a line between East and West in a lot of ways, the U.S. and Asia, and also with the Spanish influence. So it was kind of a unique place, and a place that in a lot of ways I kind of fell in love with.
What are you working on right now?
What am I working on right now? Good question. I'm still working on fast food stuff. I have a lot of consumer surveys that I'm going over. I was able to give a survey about consumer preferences with fast food to about 150 college students in the Philippines. So I'm going through that and trying to kind of tease out what are the patterns, what are the differences between Western taste and American taste, and why in fact do most locals in the Philippines prefer national brands opposed to Western multinational brands.
So is that where you see the preferences for the sweet versus the like the ketchup and things like that? Yeah,
in the sense that this was a pre-established taste, and so when McDonald's was first introduced, they really weren't aware of that, and so in a lot of ways it was something that locals didn't gravitate towards because it just wasn't something they were familiar with. And Jollibee, which was started by local Filipino, was much more attuned to what local consumers wanted. So they were able to kind of take this knowledge and use it to their advantage to kind of get ahead in the marketplace or ahead of McDonald's.
They knew what they liked.
Right, definitely, definitely.
Now, some of the other things you teach, ritual, belief, and magic.
Oh yeah, magic, ritual, and belief. That's one of the courses that I've been teaching since 2002, and it's a course that a lot of students gravitates towards because it's I guess in some ways cool or mysterious, or some ways mystifying. So many students take it, and I really enjoy teaching it.
What kind of things do you learn in that, or do you teach you that?
Oh well, we talk about voodoo, we talk about witchcraft and sorcery, we talk about the religious use of drugs, which I always have to say is not using drugs religiously, but the religious use of drugs, things of this nature.
When you look at things like that, ritual and things, and you think of it in terms of maybe less sophisticated culture, a less sophisticated society, and all the things that I've looked at and read, it almost seems as if the ritual almost helps even in earlier civilizations, help them get through something, help them deal with something that may be a disaster,
right.
Maybe or an Indian tribe who go through a ritual, and then they can deal with it.
Yeah, through rituals. A lot of times people are able to kind of reestablish or rekindle community ties. Rituals, in effect, are religion in action. So whereby a community of believers can kind of reaffirm their ties to one another, reaffirm their beliefs, and oftentimes they kind of become important in times of social stress. So when there's periods where basic human action is sometimes wanting, people can kind of in some ways tap into the supernatural as an external source of strength.
And in reality, we probably all have our own rituals.
Oh, definitely.
In our own families every day.
Right. And that's one of the things I try to at least kind of point out in the class is, to students, oftentimes they're very much interested in learning about the exotic other. And I try to point out the similarities between what goes on in tribal or band societies and our own societies. I mean, after all, we're all human, and we share, basic wants and desires.
People in a tribal society might think Thanksgiving is awfully strange.
Yeah, it in many ways depends on your cultural knowledge or your background. So what for us seems we would take for granted, to the outside it may seem curious or strange.
Also, you had done a paper on brownout situations in the Philippines and what happened with that.
Right. I was interested in how intermittent power outages, what we term blackouts, what they term brownouts, how that affects local business dynamics. So I was mainly interested in seeing how local street store merchants grapple with or deal with these kind of unpredictable events. So when the power's cut, their local businesses doesn't really grind to a halt. Rather, they kind of shift into the stopgap mode of operations where they have to kind of change their sales strategies and change their approach to dealing with customers. So this was something that I was interested in the fact that brownouts create kind of these periodic liminal moments where things are put in flux, and so they have to know how to operate and then shift back into more normalized modes of retailing once the power comes back.
They have to think on their feet.
Yeah, in many ways they do. They have to be very adept and flexible in terms. And this is, again, one of the differences between retailing here in a developed society and that of a less developed society, where things like undercapitalized infrastructure and disasters, the impact of these events tend to be much more profound.
And they probably really need the business. They can't stop.
Yeah, well, their business is, the same all over the world.
Dr. Ty Matejowski.
Yes.
I'm saying your name different every time, but I think thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
It was so interesting.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I think I'm going to just sign up for some anthropology course.
You should. I'll have you at the head of the class.
I'm Charna Davis-Wiese. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time on UCF Profiles.